Hello and welcome to the second in the InTouch COVID-19 webinar series. I'm Annette Berry from the InTouch content team, and today I'm joined by John Courtney, who will be presenting on business strategy during the COVID-19 crisis. If you missed the first instalment in the series from Sally Pelthorpe, you will be able to watch the recording on Bright Talk, and it's really interesting, all about stakeholder engagement. Slides will be sent out after the webinar today, and we'll be holding a Q&A after the main presentation, so please do submit your questions. If you have any technical issues, please refresh your browser, and if they still remain, just let me know in the chat function. I'll hand over to John now for the main presentation.
Thanks very much, Annette, and good afternoon, everybody. So my name's John Courtney. I'm founder and chief executive of Boardroom Advisors. And just a tiny bit of background about me before we start. So I've been lucky enough to have 7 businesses over the past 40 years. And Boardroom Advisors, the current one has been going for 5 years. And we provide part-time executive directors, and we have 14 regional directors and 60 advisors throughout the United Kingdom. And we advise people on many things, and one of the most common is business strategy. And obviously with the current situation, perhaps with people's pipelines getting a little thinner, perhaps with more time to consider things, it's maybe a good time to be having a look at and reassessing your business strategy for going forward, for coming out of lockdown. And that's basically what we're going to have a look at today. So with no further ado, we'll go to the slides. Hopefully that gets the slide up. So growth strategy to maximize opportunities after lockdown. So as I say, with perhaps a lull in business, great time to be having a look and seeing whether your business strategy is relevant and current for the new normal, as they call it, and that's really what we're going to be tackling. And when we're talking to clients, and we look at strategy and strategic direction, and we ask these sort of questions, you know, do clients look at strategy? And typically, well, there's all shapes and sizes, but many clients do look at strategy. Typically, the larger ones do it on a much more formal basis, annual strategic reviews and this sort of thing. Smaller ones, perhaps a little less so. Perhaps it's one sheet of paper. Perhaps it's just in the founder's head sometimes. So as I say, all shapes and sizes. What often happens though is that strategy and implementation of strategy are often completely disconnected. So there's a strategic review, there's a document perhaps put together, everybody discusses it for a time, and then it almost goes into the proverbial drawer to be hooked out again in another year's time. Now, strategy obviously shouldn't be like that, and strategic documents should really be living, breathing documents and adjusted as we go. And one of the things we're going to have a look at is exactly how to do that. We also talk to clients about who discusses strategic direction, getting my words in a twist. Now, often this should be the directors. That's in a board situation. That's kind of their role. But sometimes other people are involved, department heads and so on, for larger companies. For smaller companies, it's the founder's wife, and so on. And how we often ask how the client goes about analyzing strategic direction and using tools, and we're going to cover some in today's webinar, is a very useful way of doing it. Strategic direction is very difficult to do in isolation, to do without a structure and a process, and that's why management tools are really useful to do that. They don't necessarily answer all the questions, but they give you a framework in which to tackle some of the issues. And we often ask, is strategic direction done through the with a board advisor or a non-exec director or some external third party, a management consultant, say? Very useful process that sometimes if you're in a company, you're a little too close to things to perhaps see all the various options. So having somebody to facilitate around a management structure is a very useful way of doing it. And so what we're going to cover is some of those tools that might be of use and how to use them. So why look at strategy? Well, first and foremost, it gives the company clear purpose and a direction, really. And as I say, various tools are there. We're going to look at 3 of them. We're going to look at SWOT, which is a very common tool. Lots of people know this, so we're not going to cover, well, we're not going to spend too long on that, but we are going to cover it. A crisis assessment, which obviously in today's environment is particularly useful. And most analysis, which I personally trained as a strategy consultant a long time ago now, but it's very useful helping organizations get from where they are now to where they want to be. And that's what strategy is all about. And it really is the single most important thing advisors can help with. Right, so no further ado, let's look at the easy one. So SWOT, as I say, lots of people know this. Strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. Really useful. It's been around a while, but it's a very, very useful tool for helping to get issues out on the table. What it doesn't do is then take any of those issues and do something with them. But a really useful starting point for strategic review, best done in a group, best done as a brainstorming exercise, rather than people doing it in isolation and you know, perhaps coming to a review with their list. Much better. Everybody comes with a blank mind and a blank sheet of paper. Hopefully there's a facilitator, a non-exec director or consultant or whatever, and goes through this as a brainstorming exercise. And with brainstorming, certain rules apply. So that is no criticism. You give ideas off the top of your head. You shout them out around the room. It's top of the head stuff. And at least at the beginning, it's not thinking and analysing and criticising, particularly not criticising. It's getting the ideas out, getting all of them, and not worrying if they're a bit wacky. Blue sky, as the consultants say. Get the ideas out, get them on the board, get a long list, and only when you start to run dry to then start to analyse. And so this little grid just gives you an idea, left-hand side, really just showing that the strengths and the weaknesses should be internal things. So, for example, we have a perceived weakness on our financial control. That would be an internal issue. That would be a weakness. Opportunities and threats, external. Threat, well, okay, COVID-19, there's an obvious one. You need to be a little bit more precise than that about what the threat of COVID-19 is, but however, we'll come to that. Just an idea of something that is external to your organization. That's what we mean by that. And you can see at the top, these things, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, should be either helpful or harmful to achieving objectives. So you've done your brainstorming, you've got a long list, you've been around the room, people are starting to run dry. What do you do then? Well, let's say we're dealing with weaknesses. So you then analyze and start to look at perhaps some of the smaller weaknesses, some of the little ones, perhaps join 2 or 3 together to make something a little bit bigger. Try and get a sense of scale, try and get a sense of important. So what are the big ones? What are the big weaknesses that you really need to work on? Because if you've got a list of 10, 15 things, well, you're not going to be able to work on all of them. So we are, and you'll see on one of the later tools, we are going to have a look at those main items. What are the big things that we're actually going to work on? What's going to move the dial? So getting some sort of sense of scale, I think, and importance on all of these things. So you start with strengths. Strengths are actually quite difficult to do, but weaknesses are, most companies find really easy. There's lots of things to complain about. Opportunities, yes, there's often some gems in there. Threats tend to get a bit woolly. Brexit, COVID, trying to be quite precise about what those threats are often helps. So we've done a SWOT analysis. And we've got a sense of scale. What are the important issues? But as I say, the SWOT has only got us so far. It hasn't actually done anything with these things. So what do we do? Well, let's have a look at the next slide, because as you can see, bottom left, we're going to park SWOT and we're going to look at another tool, and then we're going to look at a third tool in order to bring it all together. So we're just going to park SWOT. We're not, we will come back to it. So let's just have a look at a crisis strategy assessment. And these are really just a set of questions, and you can come up with different questions, but it's really to try and work out how the crisis might affect your business, but we need to do it at a high level. So, and this can be applied to any crisis. It could have been the financial crisis, 2008, could be COVID now. Let's hope there isn't something major further on. But so defining the crisis in one sentence. What exactly is the crisis? By that, I don't mean technically, but describing it, putting it down in one sentence so that you're quite clear about what it is you're trying to deal with. Relatively easy in the current circumstances. And then have a look at what will change in the world. By that, I mean the world in general, not necessarily just in business or in your business, but actually in the world. What sort of major changes might come about? And, have to use educated guesswork in order to do this, because we don't have a crystal ball. But for example, you might find that there might be less foreign travel, at least for a period of time. That's just an example of what might change in the world as a whole. But lots of different things. And bring it down more, closer focus to you, what is likely to change in your industry as a result of the changes in the world and as a result of the crisis. Are there any particular things for your industry? So, for example, if you're in the travel industry, or hospitality industry, then less foreign travel is a major factor. So you can see the connection there. There may be some connections, there may be some changes for your industry in particular, there may not be. It's just asking the question. And then looking at other things, how might this affect your own revenue streams? Again, if you're in the tourism industry, you can see that this might be quite substantial, and you might, is it going to halve or whatever? You try and put some parameters on it. And looking at your value proposition, how might this change? Might it change? It might be exactly the same. It might completely stand it on its head. It might force you to go back to looking at your value proposition and whether you have one, but that's a side issue. And how might it alter your customer segments and the relationships that you have with your customers and your clients? Are you going to be selling to the same types of people that you have been before? Or is that actually now going to change a little? And is your relationship going to be the same, or is it going to be different? Just thinking through the consequences, really. And how will it alter the distribution channels and the partners that you have? Is it more likely that you're going to go direct? Is it more likely you're going to have different channel partners? And how are your resources going to change? Are you going to need less people? Are you going to need fewer systems or more complicated systems or more people? Perhaps you're ramping up as a result of this particular crisis. It's actually being a force for good for your particular business. And you might need to ramp up and have more people. What about your cost structure? Again, resources and cost structure are closely associated. But thinking it through, how are things likely to be different in the new normal? Now, again, you don't have the crystal ball. It's a matter of making an educated guess at some of these things. But better that than not having a plan in place, not trying to think it through, and then letting circumstances dictate, and then perhaps you're being a little late to the game. So just go back a bit. So that's just kind of, it's a few relatively obvious questions, but it's designed to take to define what the situation is, to see how it results in changes in your industry, see how it might result in changes in your business. What do you need to do differently as a result? And you can apply this to any particular crisis. So we've looked at 2 tools, and we've got a lot of stuff here, haven't we? But actually, we still haven't put a plan in together, and we haven't yet tried to tie the theory of the strategy together with putting it into implementation. So what I want to share with you now, this is the MOST analysis. And I was very lucky to train as a strategy consultant a few years back now, and this is one of the major things that that I took from that training, and I've helped probably over 100 companies look at their strategic direction and plan how things are going to be put into practice. The benefits of this particular management tool is that it takes everything down to a level where things go on people's task lists, so that everything that you do helps you achieve your mission. Let's start at the beginning. So MOST obviously stands, you can see the 4 boxes there, for mission, objectives, strategies, and tactics. Looks quite simple, like SWOT, doesn't it? In fact, MOST is quite, it's kind of a bit like an onion. When you start to peel back the layers, it's not quite as simple as it sounds. So let me just talk you through it. So we start with mission. And when we're doing this for companies, often half the time we're allocated, be that half a day or a day, is generally spent on the mission, because what you need to do is to get the directors, those that are responsible for strategy in the company, aligned, and all wanting to go to the same place in the same time scale. So the first thing that you do is to set timescales. So what period are we covering here? You want something of substance, so perhaps a year. You can go as far as 3 years, 5 years. These days, the world moves too quickly, really. So, and sometimes clients have 2 timescales. They might say, well, we're going to get to X by the end of year 1 and Y by the end of year 3. So you have a longer term timescale and a shorter term, which is fine. And by mission, by the organization's purpose, by this I mean business mission, hard business facts. We're not talking about a vision statement. We want to be the best in the industry and so on. We're talking about hard-nosed business. How much sales? So what's the turnover and what's the profit? And I suggest for this purpose, there's a lot more to a business organization's purpose, but for this purpose, for the purpose of the MOST analysis, I suggest we stick just with sales and profit, because it keeps a very high level focus to where it is we want to go. and what it is we want to achieve in that particular timescale. Now, strategy is about where you are now and where you want to get to, and then how you get from A to B. So step number one really is looking at where you are now. So you have to go back to your financial data and say, well, where are we now? What is our current position on sales and turnover? Sometimes that can be tricky. We've got a client at the moment that isn't exactly sure about what their financial position is. They know what was filed at Companies House a year or so ago, but in the interim period, they haven't perhaps got the financial control that they want or need. So obviously that's a weakness in the organisation that appeared on the SWOT analysis. However, you have to make a best guess at what your current financial position is if you're not on firm ground. And then around the table, the group of the directors deciding, let's take that example of 1 year and 3 year, what the company wants to achieve over that period of time. Now, the speed at which you want to develop, grow, let's say, determines it determines the scale, which in turn determines how many things you have to do. So, for example, if in 1 year's time you want to grow the business by 3% in terms of sales and profit, then actually you probably don't need to do a whole heap in order to do 3% growth. If, however, you want 50% growth in that period of time, you can tell logically that you're likely to have to do a lot of stuff. So the speed at which you want to grow determines the scale at which you're going to do things and perhaps the volume at which you're going to do things. The important thing in here is to get consensus. It isn't necessarily right being 3% or 50%. Just use those as examples. What's important is there is consensus. And the difficulty often comes because the directors are often different ages. They want different things. Perhaps they want to exit at different times, exit the company and so on. So everybody has slightly different personal agendas. That's just human nature. So getting that consensus can be a little tricky, and it's why it takes perhaps the most time. But consensus you have to get, even if it's taking most of the time, because everything else is built on sand if that isn't achieved. And perhaps there's a little bit of compromise needed, but you need to set that. You might, as I say, have a 1 year or 3 year or both. The idea is just to agree it. The idea is that the most analysis that everything ties together. So from the mission, we go to the objectives, and these are the key goals, the key things, the key planks. It doesn't matter what word you use, but it's the key things that will help achieve the mission. And if you go round to the other boxes, the strategies are options to achieve those objectives. And finally, tactics are how the strategies will be put into action. Everything ties in together from mission round to tactics. So if we have a look at objectives, what are the key things that will help achieve the mission? Let's say it was 50%, but let's say that's 50% over 3 years, perhaps a more realistic timescale for that sort of size of growth, unless you're a very early stage business. How do you get these key things? What are the key things? It's very difficult to think of these things in isolation, top of the head. It's, you're having to scratch your head. And the easy way around this is to go back to the SWOT analysis. So let me just switch slides on you, and let's go back to the SWOT analysis. Sorry, I just missed my screen. So we're going to use the key things from the SWOT analysis to turn them into objectives for most. So if you remember, we had a list. Let's take the weaknesses. We had a list of weaknesses, and we've worked out which are the stronger ones, the more important ones. Now, overall, if we're going to come out with some objectives, we're going to take them from the SWOT analysis, then we don't want too many things to work on. We obviously want to correct some weaknesses and want to make most of opportunities that are out there. So they're probably the two boxes that are most important to us. But there may be a strength that is so important, that is fundamental to the business, that if we lost that, we might lose everything, or we might lose a substantial portion of our turnover or something. So we mustn't forget strengths, but perhaps there might be one strength in our list of half a dozen or so objectives. We might take one from strengths. Threats, again, there might be one or two big ones in there, but the general catch-all of competition, best avoided. There's always competition, no matter what you come up with. So we want to take the big issues from these things and convert them into opportunities. So how do we do that? So let's take the example. We had a weakness earlier we just invented. This is top of the head, so I'm going live on this. So the weakness was a perceived weakness in financial strength. So that might be a weakness, it might be real or whatever, but it's certainly perceived. And we might consider that to be a really important weakness. So when we're converting this into an objective in most, let me go back to the most slides. If we're converting it into an objective, then we just need to turn it round. So, we reverse it as a weakness. So we want to strengthen our perceived financial position. That bit's easy. But we need to do just a little bit more than that, because there has to be a reason. There has to be a little bit more detail. And one of the ways of doing that is just having the catchphrase, which will. Not much of a catchy phrase, is it? But so improve the perceived financial position, which will what? Well, if it doesn't do anything, it's not really an objective. So which will, let's say, perhaps, again, I'm making this up, allow us to take on more enterprise clients. You might guess that enterprise clients would do financial checks on the company, and if there's a perceived financial weakness, they might not pick up those clients. So that just gives it a bit more definition, puts it more in focus, sharpens it a little bit. So that's kind of the process. You go to each of the major strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, turn them around, convert them into an objective, give them some definition and focus, by adding the phrase which will, or something similar. It doesn't have to be those particular words, but you're just trying to get more definition, and that kind of seems to do the job. So now you've got, let's guess you've got one key strength, a couple of absolute key weaknesses, a couple of really big opportunities, and a really nasty threat, all kind of converted now into objectives. Have you done the job? Well, there's always an acid test at each one of these boxes. The objectives, they're key goals that will help achieve the mission. So you need to ask yourself, acid test, if I get these things in place, if in that example, if I resolve our perceived financial weakness, are we more or less likely to get to our mission? Now, we get through all of these objectives, am I likely to get at or very close to the mission that we've set ourselves, which in the example was 50% over 3 years? If the answer is no, then, well, perhaps you haven't drilled down enough. Perhaps you don't have enough objectives. Perhaps you're missing a key one. But again, I stress, Try not to have too many. You can't work on too many things at once. And if you try to, you lose focus, and then you're working on smaller objectives instead of bigger ones. Okay, so we've now got half a dozen objectives. So far, so good. So what are we now going to do? Well, for each one of those, if we move to the box marked strategies, for each one of those objectives, we're going to look at options to achieve them. And that's the key word, is options. Strategies are options. That's all they are. They're not necessarily the right route. They're not necessarily the magic pill, the golden bullet, whatever. They are just options. And so here we are. We're back in brainstorming territory. People sometimes said to me, strategy can be really boring. Well, it can be, but actually bits of strategy I find really exciting and interesting. And one of those is looking at strategies. It's brainstorming. For each one of these objectives, what are our options? What things could we put into place that might change that objective, that might help us achieve that objective? So let's take the example. We have earlier, the perceived weakness of financial position, and we're going to alter that to be an improved financial position, which will get us some more enterprise clients. Well, what are our options? What can we do? Again, brainstorming around the table. Come on, guys, what ideas? What can we do? And you can imagine one or two ideas that might come back. Perhaps might shore up the financial position by getting investors on board. Okay, it's an option. Remember, it's brainstorming. We're not criticizing. We're not analyzing. We're just getting it out there. There's one. Another one might be getting perhaps you don't have a financial director, but getting a financial director. So somebody who's respected, I don't know, in order to boost the perceived weakness of their financial position. So there's two suggestions. And again, around the room, there might be half a dozen different suggestions, options that will help you achieve that particular objective. And then guess what? As you start to run dry, as you start to scrape the barrel, you then start to analyze and to criticize and perhaps pull the weaker of those options together to make stronger ones. And then you have to decide. You have to, because you're going to put some things in action here. This isn't just a theoretical plan. Which of these strategies, which of these options are we actually going to try? Now, if you've got half a dozen different ideas, it's going to be very difficult to put half a dozen into practice. You want one, or possibly I would suggest at most two, options to be running with at any one time. You don't necessarily know what's going to work, so it's using best guess, best estimate as to what are the most likely to succeed. And you can get consensus around the table. And perhaps in the example we've chosen the two that I've given. Perhaps we're going to get some investment on board, and at the same time, we're going to get a financial director, perhaps a part-time one. And we're going to see if those two strategies achieve the objective. And the other four ideas that come up with perhaps were lesser ones. And we're not going to ditch them completely. We're going to keep a record of them. We may go back to them because at some stage, through analysis, we may find that the strategies we put into place, that neither of them are working terribly well. And sometimes you don't know until you're trying it and you're trying to put them in action. And you want a place to go back to in case these options don't work terribly well. That's one of the great things about the most analysis. You've got places to go back to if things aren't working out as well as you'd like. But let's choose those two strategies. That's what we're going to try, because that's what we think is are the best options. And we would do those for each of those objectives. So We then move to the fourth box, tactics, how the strategies will be put into action. This is one of the great things about the most analysis, because so far we've really been talking theoretical. It's theory about the mission, it's theory about the key objectives, it's theory about the strategic options to investigate. But now we're actually going to do some stuff, and we're going to see if some of these things work, and some will and some won't. Tactics are about how the strategies will be put into action, and the key things here are around having about having an owner and having timescale. So let's take the example to make that live. So we're going to investigate having a financial director for the company. So who's going to organize that? Well, so looking around the table, and perhaps it's the chairman's job, or the founder in a smaller company. So perhaps the founder is going to, so what's he going to do? And he's going to do several actions, isn't he? He's going to, perhaps, I'm making this up, but perhaps he's going to be investigating the marketplace. He's going to be pulling people in for interview. And then perhaps the third tactic might be that the board as a whole will then make a final decision on who to appoint. So there's three perhaps tactics, two of which are owned by the founder or the chairman in a larger company, and then perhaps the last one by the board as a whole. Now, that's just an example, obviously, but it shows that what happens at this level is that then things from the tactics go on people's to-do lists, task lists, whatever you call them. So the founder now has two actions on his to-do list. He's got to research the marketplace, and he's got to interview people. And by doing that, and we've got a timescale, haven't we? So on what timescale? And you agree around the table. Well, okay, perhaps it's next month he's reviewing the marketplace. The month afterwards he's interviewing, and the third month the board are appointing. So it's a 3-month process. So it's obviously not a startup business. So you've got timescales and you've got owners, and it's going on somebody's to-do list. So then actually things are going to happen, because things are going to be driven forward from task list. And again, the acid test is, well, are these the right tactics? Well, we're not certain, but if these tactics work, is the strategy likely to be achieved? If the strategies work, are the objectives going to be achieved? If the objectives work, is the mission likely to have been close to or achieved? That's always the acid test. For me, the great thing about this most analysis is two things. One is the tactics mean that things get done, because you need to review the most analysis. It must not be shoved in a drawer and picked up a year later. It must be on a regular review. Now, perhaps for smaller companies, my slides seem to have refreshed. How odd. Perhaps for smaller companies, it should be about perhaps quarterly review. Perhaps for larger companies, perhaps it's a monthly review. And at that review, obviously people are looking at the tasks that people will have done. So, Mr. Founder, did you manage to research the marketplace? Oh, I haven't quite got round to it yet. Oops. There's a self-check in there, isn't there, about people getting things done. So reviewed on a regular basis. Right, I need to try and get back to my slides, which seem to have frozen. What fun. Okay, let me take slides off and then perhaps go back to slides. So I'm ending slides and I'm going back again. Good. Okay, we're just about there. Oops. Right. So this is the most analysis presented in a slightly different format. Just bullet points, starting mission at top, tactics at the bottom, as you can see, with just some little checkpoints in there. So with the mission, where are you going, and what's the time scale? So just aid memoirs. Objectives, take them from the SWOT analysis, convert them, turn them around and say which will to give it definition. Strategies are all about options, and tactics always to have tasks and timescales. So that's basically about most analysis. Key things: review on a regular basis, put it in the diaries when you do this, when you complete this, and go back, because if you find that some of the strategies you've put into place aren't working terribly well, then you have a decision. Do you ditch them, or do you adjust them slightly? If you ditch them, so let's say the options we chose of getting investors on board, how's it going? Not very well. You know, we've got no investors. We're not moving the dial. Then you can go back to some of the other options that you looked at. Well, let's not throw the baby out with the bathwater. We still need to strengthen our perceived financial position. What other options did we look at? Let's go back, revisit those. Maybe one or two of those other options are better for us than the ones we chose. Let's go back and have a look. And the most analysis allows you somewhere to go back to without throwing, as I say, the baby out with the bathwater. And the second thing, of course, is tactics and timescales. Okay, so that's kind of most analysis. That's the third of our 3 tools to have a look at strategic review. And that's really the end of the presentation as such. But looking at the screen, I can see we've got some questions coming up, which I haven't had a chance to look at. So, oh, hello, we're going back 2 seconds. So, oh. So I just wanted, first of all, I wanted to thank you and to put my details up there. And we'll come back to that at the end. There's my LinkedIn profile, email address, and the web address. But we'll come back to that at the end. But I think we have some questions.
Do you want me to talk those through, John?
Yes, go on. Because I haven't had a chance to look at those.
Yeah. Absolutely. Okay, so the first one that came in was, how do you gain consensus on strategy when situations force you to move so reactively and quickly?
Well, it's tricky, and often it requires it requires a little diplomacy. It's one of the reasons why having a third party to facilitate around a management structure like one of these is handy. If you've got somebody doing it internally, then, you know, they have an agenda, and, you know, they might be seen to be pushing their agenda or focusing more on what they consider to be important. If you have a third party there, whoever it is, then they can be independent and neutral, and they can, you know, try and get a more balanced view. But the answer is generally around discussion and then compromise. There's no easy answer to that.
Next one that's come in is, I'm worried that my board have been so complacent in terms of risk and scenario planning that we are way behind dealing with the effects of the pandemic. What would you suggest should be our first move?
Well, yes, I guess there might be a few companies like this, but this is why we're doing webinars like this. Well, it's difficult if you're not on the board. Then it's very difficult to persuade them to do that. If you are on the board, then it's a matter of perhaps talking to colleagues and getting them to have a review, to do it urgently. Most people, at least companies that perhaps are suffering from coronavirus, are likely to have a little bit of time on their hands. It's a great time to review. Get somebody in to do it externally. If you can't, get your chairman. Get a consultant, get somebody external to facilitate it. They can hit the ground running. They've got processes and structures like I've gone through. There are many of them. You know, these are the ones I like. but use somebody external who uses management processes.
Thank you. To what degree will the regular performance KPI reports to the board during COVID-19 help to assess if strategy needs to be changed? Also, support of SWOT, loan to risk assessment, combined with an option appraisal of the strategic goals already in situ, help to influence the board to understand and agree the degree to which an organisation's strategy needs to change.
Two questions there. Let's tackle the first one, because I was thinking so much about that one I kind of lost the second one. So KPIs always useful. If you can measure something, then you can see whether the dial is being moved or not. So you've got to think for each strategy, how are you going to measure it? Now, it may be a black and white thing, like we're going to get a financial director on board. Well, you can't really KPI that, can you? It's you either have or you haven't. So it's very black and white. And the objective in that example is difficult to KPI, but others might be easy, because it might be about increasing sales by 10%. It might be by, if perhaps a weakness is that you're losing staff, well, what's the measurement of losing staff? Your turnover is X%, and therefore to measure an improvement, it's X minus 20% or something. You have a KPI in there in order to measure whether the success of something is what you want. And you can use it to define an objective. So the objective might be to reduce staff attrition by 20% over X period. So you use KPIs in order to define things more. So and the second part of that I kind of lost.
Was in support of SWOT, loan to risk assessment, combined with an option appraisal of the strategic goals already in situ before COVID-19, helped to influence the board to understand the degree to which an organisation's strategy needs to change. So fundamentally, what was already in place, how much more work do you need to do around that?
Yes. Listen, the more work you can do, the better prepared you are. It's difficult drilling into that without specific examples. So I would probably, with the time restraints, we're probably best looking at another one.
Okay. It's looking like we will have to make significant redundancies, but many of our workers are at least semi-skilled. I'm worried that when demand picks up, we will not have the workforce or skills available.
Tricky. Well, and that's one of the reasons that the furlough scheme exists, to try and deal exactly with that problem. So you can furlough people, and they've announced an extension, as I'm sure most people are aware. So you can furlough people, so you're not necessarily making them redundant, and then as hopefully as business picks up, you can take some of those people off furlough. Now, it may be some hard decisions are made, and some people are made redundant, and those decisions might have to be made. And then, as any business, if you downsize and then sales pick up, you have to take staff back on, and you may not get as many staff as you need, or they may not be as skilled or as experienced. And that's something the management, the directors have to weigh up. The cost of keeping people on when perhaps there isn't the volume of business, against the cost, and there is a cost of taking people back on or training new people in order to do that role if business does pick up. It's a risk and reward balance that all directors have to get, at every month really, but particularly now.
There hasn't yet been any mention of the business products, goods and services as part of strategic analysis, planning and evaluating as to where the products fit into the current marketplace, i.e. how far into its life cycle is our product. Yes,
okay, good point. I'm doing two of these talks for In Touch Network, and the second one is about growth. And how to address growth in the new normal. And so that's perhaps where you drill into. I certainly cover that in that particular discussion. So I don't really want to open that now. It's a bit of a tricky subject, but it's a rather detailed thing to go into in a Q&A. But yes, you certainly need to assess not only your business proposition, the USP you have in the marketplace, but every section of your marketing, be that the product life cycle, the value proposition, the messaging. You need to drill into a lot of that in order to make sure that it's relevant for the current situation. So what we've been talking about today is the business strategy at the top, but then there are subsections, and growth strategy or marketing strategy it kind of comes to the next level down. So come on the next webinar and we'll tackle that.
Next, should effective financial management be at the heart of any business planning and strategy? Without it, how can a business effectively understand where its starting point is and develop its strategy?
Yes. Sorry, it's an easy answer. That, of course, absolutely. And that's management on the board, and that's management in a level down from the board, depending on the size of the company. Yes, unless you've got the right people and the right products and services, and you have a value proposition and something that's unique about the company, and so on, then actually everything in the company is built on sand.
What is the risk of relying on information, especially internal information, of previous years and trends to make strategic decisions in a situation that is obviously disrupted and is very different?
Yeah, fair question. Listen, strategy is about where you are now and where you want to get to. So the where you are now has to be based on historical information. And there's no problem with that. Where you want to get to and how you're going to get there has to be, as I said earlier, a lot of it is educated guess. We don't know the answers. We don't even know how deep the recession is going to be. We don't know how long the virus is going to be around. So we don't have the crystal ball. So it's a matter of educated guess. Make the best guess that you can based on the knowledge that you have and the experience that you and your colleagues have. That's the best that you can do. I remember people saying to me, we talk about budgeting on a different webinar, and people say, well, surely budgets are just guesses, aren't they? And the answer is yes, they are the best guess. They're an educated guess as to, given all the information that you have, both historical and current, you make an educated guess. And that's the best that you can do. And sometimes you get it right, and sometimes you're wide of the mark. And that's why strategy needs to be reviewed on a regular basis. Because then you can, if you're pointing the ship in this direction, and if things don't work out quite as you see, you can start to adjust slightly. Or if you're completely wrong, that you can scrap it and start again.
I'm presuming at a time like this, to be looked at more frequently than ever because the variables are greater.
Absolutely.
Would you ever use a balanced scorecard model?
Yeah, listen. We've been through three management structures here, processes. Balanced scorecard, really useful. There's lots of really useful processes out there. You've got to work with what you know, what you're comfortable with. The process isn't so much important. I use these because I like them and I'm used to using them. And if I get my knickers in a twist, or if the client around the table has some difficulties or issues, I've got a good idea of how to get out of that. So you've got to use the tools that you're comfortable with, really. But balanced scorecard, yeah, some people really like it.
I imagine this is, again, probably completely individual to each business. But what is the optimum number of objectives a company should be working on at any one time?
Yeah, I think that's a fair question. Not too many. Let me give you a number for no other reason than you kind of want a number to hang on. 6. Why? If you have less than that, are you really tackling? I mean, maybe there's only 4, maybe there's 8, but if you get to 8, you know, don't try and bite off more than you can chew. Better to go for the big 4 and get the big 4 done than to try and do 8 and end up with only doing 4, but they're not necessarily the biggest 4. So don't try and do too much.
We are probably got like 2.5 minutes left, really.
Okay.
So we've got time to maybe tackle 1 or 2 more. So I work for a not-for-profit organisation who have suddenly found ourselves having to deliver services that we never have before due to the pandemic. Can you say how we should deal with this? It's obviously something we've never strategized for.
Well, I perhaps would. I mean, that's great, but maybe stop and strategize and figure out whether what you're now doing is actually what you should be doing, and if you should in the future be doing more or less of it. Sometimes there's a knee-jerk reaction as a situation. Gosh, we've got to do this, without perhaps sometimes thinking it all the way through. Stop, take a breath, get round the table, get the whiteboard out. Is this what we should be doing? Is this just a short-term thing? Is this what we want to be doing on a long-term basis? Just stop, take a breath, and see if it fits in the plan.
So, go to one final one. For a larger company, a lot of this sounds like it fits well in scenario planning, especially given the scale and uncertainty of changes we are currently facing. Does that resonate? Yes,
but equally true for smaller companies. You know, it's just kind of on a smaller scale, isn't it? But also on a faster timescale, because smaller companies work so quickly and things change so rapidly. Now we're all in a rapid change situation with the virus, so we all have to be reviewing our strategies very quickly. But yes, of course, fits very well with scenario planning and big companies. The difference is that where I've advised some larger companies, a lot of plans go into the drawer and don't get looked at and don't get reviewed. So that's the key mistake that bigger companies make, and smaller ones too, I guess.
Okay, well, I think that's probably a good time to start wrapping things up, as we have about 2 minutes left. So thanks to John. I think that's been really informative and interesting. As he says, there is the second part of this webinar series that John's doing, and that's next Tuesday at 5 p.m. So please do join us for that. Slides will be sent out after via email to all registrants, and if you could leave feedback, that would be fabulous. So I think that's it. There's John's final slide. If you have got feedback, like I say, do leave it. It really helps us to curate our content. And have a good evening. Thank you.
And do feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn or contact me on email. Thanks very much, everybody.
Okay. Good night. Thank you.